The North Korean regime is very much known for and has a history of producing like shit tons of counterfeit United States currency. The idea that North Korea would be providing counterfeit currency to regime remnants to pay their soldiers, right? Because they're like, it's USD, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's not a surprise. As far as will it give them maybe short-term relief in the sense that regime remnants can hand some IRGC douche canoe a couple of what looks like US 100-hour US 100 hours like USD? Sure. It won't fix the structural problems that Armin's talking about, and it will come at an increased cost of, I don't want to say inflate, almost like confidence in currency, which the North Koreans and their proxies be like, great, that erodes confidence in the US dollar. Of the Mullah regime, sure. So the impact there is probably, it's not going to be, it's not going to have the level of impact like a strategic level. It might have a short term tactical impact.
Okay,
As
what
far as,
about?
yeah, the
Sorry.
CHICOM's providing material support vis-a-vis land routes from Pakistan and focusing on things like man pads and or satellite navigation and geospatial intelligence that we knew they were going to do. The idea that the Chinese Communist Party, Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state, or other actors within the autocratic bloc would use U.S. engagement in Iran as a facilitative pretext to engage in bait and bleeder bloodletting. That we knew was going to happen. We still had to remove the regime because of the regime's the unique danger that the Mullah regime posed because of its pseudo-theologically motive, the pseudo-theologic nature of its motives, and the fact they were getting ready to mass launch against our bases, Israel, Gulf states, and there was a good chance that they were marrying their chem bio warheads to solid fuel ballistic missiles. They have to go. And this administration is getting really sick and tired of this, like, they're not going to fall for the dripping us along bit. Like, a lot of people are pushing Donald to fix the friggin' just to finish the job. That should take about 2 weeks, and we're already moving heavy bombers to do that. And that will make that campaign, if it goes like what me and other guys are pushing, seem like the previous stuff seemed like they hit Disneyland.
Okay,
Yeah. So as far as the man pads, this kind of ties in real quickly with what we were talking about yesterday on how do we provide security for Iranian civilians when this project or this campaign reaches its second phase, which is the uprising by Iranian civilians once the regime has reached its like lowest point of weakness. And we were talking about we're going to use weaponized drone swarms and or like rotary aircraft or say AC-130s. So the idea of providing mad pads is not just, almost assuredly is not just to pull U.S. strike aircraft at risk. It is also and or to push their altitude, their operational altitude higher, which traditionally would reduce your accuracy when you place munitions on targets. That worked. That's what it did to Putin's people in Ukraine, right? And it also did that to Soviet forces in Afghanistan. That's not going to have an impact with regards to us as far as accuracy, like bird guide munitions from fast move or fixed wing aircraft. As far as like having rotary aircraft like helicopters or AC-130s providing close air support like over protesters, that's an issue, right? Because for the AC-130 to be able to provide consistent close air support with its cannons, it has to be about 7,500 feet off, like in altitude or lower, so that its cannons can deflate enough when it goes into its turn to be able to engage ground targets. If you go above that, then the accuracy becomes pretty loose, and you don't want to have 40 Mikes or 105 millimeter cannons landing around unarmed civilians. That would be a disaster. As far as rotary aircraft, they're going to go very close. They're very, by definition, more vulnerable to mad pads. Drones, not really. I mean, it depends on the type of drone. And that's probably what they're doing, almost assuredly. The goal should be to combine restarting our military campaign with a maximum push to eliminate the regime remnants while continuing to do our blockade that is causing structural economic damage to the regime. And that should put us at a place where the regime will be as weak as it could ever be.
Okay, one quick, can I address one thing? So regarding the yuan being used to supplant the Iranian rial, is that do you think that's a possibility? Basically, the Islamic regime needs to only survive, right? It doesn't need to win the war. It just needs to survive somehow economically. So if the entire real collapses, Iranian real collapses, they transition to a yuan based system. They're getting food aid from China. Is it possible for China to keep these guys alive basically
So
until,
if we
yeah.
Yeah, so definitely the goal for the like for Chinese Communist Party and Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state is to find any which way to have remnants of the regime to survive. At this point, it's pretty clear that the IRGC leadership is running the show. There's fragments there that said that's who's running the show. So there's that. As far as the Chicom supplanting the currency, yeah, maybe. Providing food aid, here's the issue with that. And I hate doing this because it's a really fucked thing to do. If we get into a war with over Taiwan with the Chinese Communist Party, we're going to deny food like support to China. If that happens, Chinese people start starving really quickly. So if that leverage is still the same here, if the Chinese Communist Party is, oh, we will provide food aid to the IRGC, then we go, oh, we're just going to cut food aid off from China. Now you have a choice there, Chicom. Use what little food you have left to feed your people who already hate you, and we'll have uprisings. We already have uprisings in China. Or you can try to use the scarce food you have to feed the IRGC. You can that weapon works both ways. As far as one of the things we looked at before operations occurred was airlifting food, potable water, critical medicine into the main cities in Iran to minimize the impact of sanctions against Iranian people. I'm in the process of pushing that up the chain again. We can't feed all of Iran by air. There's just not enough planes to do it. We could definitely sit there and blunt the damage as part and parcel of a broader strategy that Armin talked about with focusing on cities in the south that would be staging areas to then train, arm, and or serve as the base of operations for anti-regime elements to then liberate Iran incrementally.
So- Okay, so let me. Can I just ask about three things, and I just want short responses to these if possible. First of all, the yuan, the reason we people choose the U.S. dollar is for a reason. Like you cannot, if people were going to, if yuan was an option as an alternative to the US dollar, it would have already been used. You can't just be like, it's an inferior currency for a reason. It's less reliable, less people accept it. It's not like people were like, oh, we're using the US dollar to trade, but the yuan was always an option and we never thought about it. If it was a good option, it would already be a currency that globally would have been relied on. So you might want to, the Islamic Republic might come and say, oh, now we're going to accept yuan, and you're going to pay people in yuan. People want USD because it's the USD, right?
Okay.
You cannot yeah, but
Apparently,
that's point
China's
number
been
one.
paying
But
apparently China's been paying Iran for its oil in yuan since 2012. That's what
yeah,
I
but we're talking volumes here, right?
uh,
And also whatever they were doing, but again, I'm not saying, I'm just checking this, right? But whatever they were doing, so if they're talking about that, that's not going to be a major change anyways. But globally, for example, your militia, they want USD, right? And it's more likely for the Iran's economy, if we hit super inflation inside Iran, like crazy, like astronomical numbers of inflation, it's more likely for Iran's economy to dollarize, right? Because this is the markets. This is not something that you could basically force upon the people, right? It is, the Iranian people are probably going to switch. They already are moving towards dollars. Like people, like big items, people are asking the price for it in dollars, right? Why are they not asking it in yuan? Because yuan is not a reliable currency, right? Like right now in Iran, when somebody wants to buy a house or a car, They're checking the value of things in dollars, right? And if we hit super inflation beyond what we're already seeing, is probably the economy might get dollarized, right? And the demand paths you're talking about, I don't see, maybe I'm wrong about this, I just don't see how it's going to move the needle. Like, obviously, it's going to cause some hassle. It's going to annoy like the Americans here and there, or the Israelis here and there. But in the grand scheme of things, that's like nothing compared to the level of military assets that they have lost or is required to actually make a big difference, especially with the blockade, right? Because right now we're not even the greatest weakness of the Islamic Republic is that the blockade is being successful. And I just don't see how these manpads are going to undo that. Like, how are they going to help with that? And maybe Jeffrey will know more about that. When it comes to food aid, again, we're talking like food aid is the volumes. We're talking Iran. We're not talking Gaza, right? We're talking the population that we're talking about here. Food aid is not going to make that much of a difference, maybe unless I'm mistaken. And you guys could talk about food aid is maybe going to get you some good pictures and some good propaganda and some people being thankful as a way to make some international for soft power, getting some good videos and images regarding the difference that you're making. But in a country of 85 million, like we're talking about a country that relies on so much farming and so much import and so many the volumes that is required to reduce the price of food is astronomical, and there's no amount of food that I could imagine that is physically possible that will undo that. Because again, like when we're talking about food situation in Iran, it's not like the food is not there. It's that it's basically the volume of it is at a level that makes it unaffordable. Like, it's the purchasing power issue. Okay, and also we're talking about starvation, and we're not talking starvation here. We're talking malnutrition, because we don't have a shortage of calories. We have a shortage of certain type of food. So we're not going to see like mass starvation of people. So again, starvation is about calorie shortages. Malnutrition is about shortages of certain type of food, like people switching their diets to cheaper type of food. So that's what we're seeing, and that is not something that we're going to be able to resolve with food aid. We could help a few people. And also, I want to remind, the blockade is not on food, right? Like the U.S. blockade is not on medicine and food. It's basically everything else except food and medicine. So we also have to keep that in mind. So I don't see. Again, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't see any of these like making a significant difference. Am I wrong about that, Jeffrey?
You're not wrong. I typed it in the chat. So the Chinese Communist Party so a couple of things. The food aid, I think that Sadat was talking about, is the Chi Coms will provide food aid to the IRGC or regime remnants, and not the entirety of Iranian people. And have the weird Chi Com regime remnants version of what tragically occurred when the United States tried to provide food assistance to North Korea under Clinton's idiotic 1994 Sunshine Plan and agreed framework, where Kim Il Ping Pong Head's dad took the food, scrubbed the U.S. flag off it, and then hoarded it for his army and triaged a third of his people to starve to death. Still, the issue that you mentioned, though, is mass and quantity, right? So probably easier to feed IRGC remnants than the entire Iranian people. There's an issue with regards to like land routes and all that. That's an issue. Again, if the United States was to catch that, food can be used both ways.
No,
Chinese
so
Communist Party. Go ahead. Sorry.
you already mentioned that part, but the thing is, like, food aid to IRGC people only, to me, doesn't make any sense, because the problem with food prices is making Iranian people angry and causing an uprising, like sparking an uprising. That's the issue with food prices. Okay,
You're saying
it's
it would
not like there's
exacerbate
not
that.
enough food in. Yes, that's the problem the Islamic Republic is facing. Not that there's not food inside Iran. Like, there's food inside Iran, people can't afford it. So if you want the IRGC people to have more food, you don't need to bring food aid. You need money, and if they have money, they can afford the food that is already inside Iran. That's an easier way to fix to gain leverage from the IRGC people rather than bringing extra food through food. That's the most inefficient way of keeping the IRGC loyal to the regime. So I don't understand that. If you want the
Well, you're
IRGC to be
helping me.
loyal to the, yeah, I know. I'm just saying. I'm just like, hey, if that's the strategy, I don't get it. If you want the IRGC to be loyal, give them more money. If you if we can find, if we can get more money, but if you the food scarcity, like the food issue, the food price issue, is more of a general public issue and a risk of an uprising.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So the professor did say that the two ways that the IRGC may not survive this would be an uprising, so revolution, if the people rise up, and or if there is a split in the IRGC. Those are the two ways he thought that this regime may not survive. But as long as this blockade and strikes probably is not enough to change the regime, basically. Which I guess we all knew that. I think you guys have
Yeah.
been saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing that, so I obviously have been saying that one thing that is missing is arming the Iranian people. I think Jeffrey agrees with it as well. But if we are relying on the blockade, the way that this could cause eventually a regime change, if we're not going to military operations, and we saw Princess of Pahlavi at Fox News today talking in a way that it seemed like he prefers the military operations to be included, not just the blockade. But if we're only relying on the blockade, the way that this could potentially go to a full regime change is that when the Islamic Republic gets so desperate at some point that they come back to the negotiating table, because one way or another they either have to decide to just keep going until they go full on economic collapse, and that would be like a Soviet Union type of regime change because they also changed because of economic collapse, or if they realize that they cannot continue pretending like they're strong, that they cannot pretend to be like defiant and resisting the United States, and basically make it very clear that they are surrendering to the United States and basically saying that this hurts too much. Let's come to the negotiating table and we'll give you what you want. And that potentially could cause a regime collapse in the sense that the regime supporters will stop supporting the regime if that happens. That would mean that the Islamic Republic would get to close to 0% support within Iran because it doesn't have the anti-regime people, but now the pro-regime people also think that they just pissed into the blood of the martyred supreme leader, and all the ideas of the Islamic Republic has not been. It's a level of humiliation that it is hard to recover from. So it's one of these two, if we're only relying on the blockade. Does that
If
make
you
sense?
don't mind,
Yeah.
I'm going to get into the response list because we've
Thank
got
you.
4
Okay.
people lined up
All right, thank you.
to respond as well. D-Dom, why don't you come on?
So about the question of Sadato, if I remember it correctly, you were talking about the blockade, the problems of the blockade, and what's going on with the food. Am I right?
Okay.
Just the
No,
fact
Right
that
now?
I'm asking.
just the fact that the hope that the blockade would economically break the back of the IRGC might be more plausible if it weren't for the aid of China trying to prop it up, basically, from behind.
But yeah, the blockade actually doesn't let IRGC give oil to China. While this happening, the reservoirs of the oil in Iran are getting filled and they have nothing, like there is no disposal for the oil. The oil stays in the reservoirs. The reservoirs are getting filled. At some point, they will be forced, to stop the drilling. Now, when you stop drilling oil out of the ground, it is a hardly reversible process. After you stop drilling and you like closed the hole where you're getting the oil out of, it is a big operation then and tons of money, like $1 billion, to restore it and use it again. So I believe just keeping the blockade, and I heard something about 2 to 3 weeks left until the reservoirs will be filled to the top. And just keeping the blockade for the additional 2 to 3 weeks will do a big damage. Also, while the reservoirs of Iran are getting filled, the reservoirs in China will start getting emptied because China has for like oil for about 100 days, like 100 and some days. That's what they are really have right now. They don't like China basically are like left with no sources of oil if we are taking Russia out of the picture because Russia isn't available to get so much oil that China needs. They had the oil from Venezuela, they had oil from, correct me if I'm wrong, from Cuba, they had oil from Iran, they had oil from like the small amount from Russia. The main oil supplies are dead for China right now. And they are all somehow under American control. That's what I've heard, what
Right.
I
Yeah, no, you're
saw.
right.
So
I think you're right, but I see it as a game of chicken. It's not a case of ultimate consequences. It's a game of who's going to blink first. So anyway.
All right, let's go to the other responses as well because we're 20 seconds and 20 minutes in and we haven't gone to the down the list. But yeah, Daniel, those are good counters to that professor. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to finish up the because Armin asked the other thing with regards to MadPad and the material support. So MadPads provided by the Chinese Communist Party, the regime remnants, and IRGC will definitely offset or undermine our ability to use rotor-wing aircraft and or AC-130s in close air support. It will have no impact on our fixed-wing aircraft or heavy aircraft that are being readied and trained right now to resume operations in an intensity that is well beyond anything they've suffered so far, because they can operate at altitude, and that's well beyond the range of any MadPad. Unlike Russians or Chaicoms, our brilliant guided munitions, and it won't be like critical munitions, like standoff missiles, right, that we have to save. It'll be munitions over target, which are like regular gravity guided bombs that have GPS stuff on them and other things that means that we get put warheads on foreheads for a lot less money. So as far if the military, I agree, the military operations have to resume. And Sadato's not wrong. The Mullah regime is trying to bullshit its way to the end of the War Powers Act. The simple fact is, if or when, and I'm hoping, and me and others are pushing when soon, the administration then resumes military operations, it will take 2 weeks to kill all the other regime elements that are there. It is not going to be like what they suffered initially with predominantly strike aircraft and carriers, right? If you're talking right now, we're getting ready to use like all of our B-1Bs, B-52s, B-2s, even B-21 Raiders are talked about being used. Like that is a lot of fucking steel on target, and they will all be brilliant guided. And if they go after the regime remnants, you will have. Remember when you put up the list? Here is all the douchebags that are still alive. There's going to be a lot more red X's all over that page, along with a whole host of other shit.
Okay, next is Gila.
Hi. First, I want to say I don't like the line of thought for Sadato. Oh, too bad, China, whatever. It's not relevant to us. We need to focus on what we can. And when we talked about food storage, it means there is food. Iran is producing food, right? It's hard to get it, but it's there. It's already on land. So when we were talking about chaos, like the first chaos start in the market, I thought we should bomb the banks or something to flow money in the air. It will make chaos in the streets. But now I'm thinking we should bomb the storage facilities so it will be open to everyone and it will make a chaos by itself. That's what I think.
Storage facilities? What? Sorry, I missed that
We
part.
have a big market, not for one person, like a shop buy there, right? The shops buy now a specific market. The storage, there is refrigerators, there is somewhere you storage potatoes, there is food storages in cities. Maybe that it's the IRGC hands right now but it's
I mean, if you want to blow up food storages, that would be considered like a human
not
rights
really,
violation. Oh.
not really, but maybe the gate, maybe like with drone, maybe just
Ah.
attack them so you will break through and people can push and take it and make chaos while doing it. It's dangerous. I think it's
I don't see that. I don't see that as a feasible strategy. I don't think people like the Iranian people are like they already have access to. People are not so desperate to go steal food. Like we don't, the Iranian people. It's not like they're starving, right? Like I think like we're thinking Darfur here, right? We're not seeing starvation. We're seeing malnutrition, and malnutrition because of higher for some people because of higher food prices. Okay, and people are not going to go raid a food storage just because they're eating chicken once a week instead of every day. Like they're like this is people usually will go raid food storage warehouses if they're starving to death, and that's not what's happening
no, but I
inside
don't think
Iran.
it's about the starvation. I think it's about what will make chaos in the street, what will help.
That's not going to cause chaos. If you blow up the gate of a food warehouse storage facility, people are going to not raid that area. They're not going to raid that area. They're not going to go raid that area.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So you say come from this
Yeah, they're not going
direction.
to be like, oh, free watermelons. Let me go raid this area for free watermelons. They're
No,
not
but
going to do that. Yeah.
I understand why you're making fun of it, but I do
No,
think
I'm not.
that like resources and gathering of people for good reasons is helpful for creating a good chaos that can lead to something else.
If you want chaos, then maybe you could blow up the gates of where they hold the weapons. That's okay. If you want absolute chaos, okay. So
Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're making progress. As long as you're joining the
yeah, okay,
chaos, I don't mind the reason.
okay. Wow, Hila is an agent of chaos. I don't know, just start chaos. I don't know how, but one way or another, I want to just I just want chaos. Hila, for somebody who looks so sweet and the way you talk, you look like a sweet, innocent woman. I want chaos. I want anarchy. I want blood in the streets. Make it happen somehow. I don't care. And you say that in the most like cute, like as calm way possible, which is interesting. Okay.
Yes, it's my English is basic, but my views are radical.
Right. Yeah. Like look at her smile when I was talking about this room chaos. You're like, yes, that's what I want. That's what I want to see. Now we're talking. I'm so excited. Chaos. Okay. Okay. All right. Agent of chaos here. All right. Who's
Okay.
next?
Last to respond, we have Samantha.
Samantha.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm like, if we're gonna have some sort of blockade that's gonna start people in China, we're gonna have crazy riots in the US. Like crazy riots. Like honestly, I think the riots in the they're gonna be riots in the US that are gonna be like initially crazier than eventually they'd be crazier in China as people are starving, obviously, but like initially we're gonna have crazier riots in the US than China.
Okay, I'm not, guys. So we're not gonna see starvation level shortages. Okay, not for a while at least. I don't know what's going to be happen in the future, right? So I want people to understand the Iranian people. They're not like it's not like the reason why they want to do an uprising is because the reason why they're so frustrated with the economic conditions is because they're used to a higher level of lifestyle that many people here maybe understand or here or other places. It's not if you went in Iran, people are already going to malls, they're shopping, they order food on the internet, they're gaming. Okay, so it's not like like somewhere in Africa where they used to have bread, but now they can't eat bread and they're starving. That's why they're upset. Okay, it's more like one thing you have to understand about people's psychology and is that if you drop from where you were before, you're going to get really angry. But if somebody much lower than you jumps from a lower level to something above higher, they're going to feel like they're really lucky. So if you, for example, are used to being able to shop very well for the new year or for your child's birthday every single year, and now you can't afford that, and that's now maybe you have to downgrade from a 2-bedroom apartment to a 1-bedroom apartment, you could see things are getting worse and worse, and you're like, you can't afford. People downgrading is mentally, it ruins you mentally for your family, especially if you're the provider of the family, especially if you're the person who is responsible for maintaining a certain level of lifestyle for your wife and for your children, and now you can't afford what you used to be able. When your daughter comes to you and tells you, I want a bike, okay, and you're like, fuck me, my daughter wants a bike and I can't afford a bike, that ruins you, okay, that destroys you. Okay, and I guess the parts, when it comes to affordability, the parts that it actually gets to not being able to afford basic needs is more healthcare related than food related. So when it comes to food, is they're not starving, they're just not eating meat as often, they can't afford fruits as often, like they can't have guests as often at their home, and like they can't afford having guests because there's nothing to put in front of them. But there's no shortages of calories if they can, like they can buy breads and beans if they were like, that is available if they, but it's humiliating. It's humiliating for you to have a certain lifestyle before and not be able to afford that right now. It's how people understand, because the way I'm talking, it makes it seem like as if I'm saying they were spoiled. But I think like everybody should understand that somebody like in Africa that used to be able to only afford, I don't know, 2 meals a day, and now they afford 3 meals a day. For them, that's a jump, that's an improvement, and they think that their lives are better. But somebody who used to be able to go on vacations every year and now they can't take their family on vacations, that second person, even though his lifestyle is on a higher level than the first person, is emotionally in a lower place than the first person, because that person saw an improvement and this person saw a downgrade. But in Iran, the area where you can actually see lack of purchasing power really hurting when it comes to basic needs, it's not food. Even though food inflation is so high that so many people are not getting the nutrition that we need, so they need. So again, we're talking malnutrition, not starvation. But when it comes to the hospital and medicine, then that's where you could point to things that are really hurting and making people not being able to do things that every person should be able to afford. So, not being able to afford chemotherapy, not being able to afford the surgery that your mother needs, or your daughter needs, or your son needs, right? Not being able to afford the medicine that the doctor just prescribed. That's a very painful area right now for many Iranians. I hope that gives you a better picture, because some people, when we're talking about food in Iran, they mistake it with some like other places in the world. Like it's not. And when I say that, I have to be careful, because to me, it seems, for some people, it might come off as me saying it's not that bad. When I say it's not Darfur level starvation, then people may be like, "Oh, okay, so I guess you guys could tolerate this." They can't, because I know they can't, because they're coming into the streets and they're dying for change, right? So that's my evidence that they can't, right? And I think most people here would also not be able to accept a downgrade and think that a lot of people, for example, if you just lost your job tomorrow, right, and you would be very frustrated, even though you're not going to starve, you're not going to run out of food, right? But imagine if you lost your job and you got another job that was worse, and then you knew the next job that was worse, and the next job that was worse, and now you're not getting a job and there's no jobs to be found, and you also think that this is not just my life, it's going to continue getting worse and worse for my child, and then for my grandchildren, and it's keep going to get shittier and shittier, and this is going to keep getting shittier unless we change the regime forever. So it's not just like one time. So imagine the frustration of losing a job, but imagine that forever continuing to get worse for you, but also your children. And there's basically no optimistic future in sight that you could be looking forward to unless you change the regime. So that is the mentality that you have to put yourself, try to understand, instead of thinking like, oh, I'm going to die from starvation kind of situation.